Hi everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if scrolling through social media is actually hurting your brain? Or if it is just how we connect these days? Well, this new study dives into that very question, looking at how we deal with our feelings and how that plays out online. So, the big idea behind this research is to get beyond just asking how much time do you spend on social media, and instead ask how are you using it and why specifically when you're struggling with your emotions. The researchers noticed that while a lot of studies focus on screen time, few look at the connection between struggling to manage your feelings and how you use social media, and how that might be linked to depression and anxiety. They wanted to see if difficulties in managing emotions might lead people to use social media in certain ways, and if those ways then affect their mental health. Basically, they found that while overall time on social media doesn't seem to be the main culprit for mental health risks, how people use it really matters. Especially for those who find it hard to regulate their emotions, they might turn to social media as a way to cope. This study explored 4 types of social media use: image management, social comparison, negative engagement, and passive consumption, and tested if these behaviors act as a bridge between tough emotions and symptoms of depression and anxiety. We know that mental health issues like depression and anxiety are huge challenges worldwide. For a while now, people have been pointing fingers at social media, thinking more time online means more problems. But this research challenges that simple idea. They're saying it is not just about the clock ticking on your screen time, but more about the dance between your internal struggles and your online activities. Think about it, we all use social media for different reasons: to stay connected, to share, to be entertained. But what if you're using it because you're feeling really down or stressed, and you're not sure how else to deal with it? That's where the idea of emotion regulation difficulties comes in. Emotion regulation is essentially your ability to handle your feelings in a healthy way. When people have a tough time with this, they might be more likely to use social media in ways that aren't super helpful for their mental health. For example, maybe they scroll endlessly to distract themselves, or they compare their lives to others they see online, hoping to feel better but often ending up feeling worse. This study proposed that these emotion regulation problems could lead to specific ways of using social media, and then those ways could, in turn, impact our mental health. So, to dig into this, the researchers decided to look at 4 specific ways people use social media. First, image management, which is all about curating your online persona, like editing photos or checking likes. Second, social comparison, where you compare yourself to others online, their lives, their looks. Third, negative engagement, which is seeking out or reacting to content that clashes with your beliefs or is generally upsetting. And finally, passive consumption, which is just aimlessly scrolling through feeds without actively engaging. Their big question was whether these 4 types of social media use would act as a link between having trouble with emotion regulation and experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety. To figure this out, they gathered a good number of adults, over 500 of them, ranging in age from 18 to 84. They used a clever design where they collected information at 2 different times, a week apart. At the first point, they asked participants about their difficulties in emotion regulation and their typical social media habits. Then, a week later, they asked them about their symptoms of depression and anxiety. They used tried and true questionnaires for this, like the PHQ-8 for depression and the GAD-7 for anxiety, which are standard tools psychologists use. They then used a statistical technique called structural equation modeling to see how all these pieces fit together. This method allows researchers to test complex relationships between multiple variables at once, essentially mapping out how one thing might influence another, potentially through an intermediary. And what did they find? It is pretty interesting. First off, as expected, people who reported more difficulties with emotion regulation also reported higher levels of depression and anxiety symptoms. This supports a lot of previous research that shows struggling to manage your feelings is a significant predictor of mental health issues. But here's where it gets more nuanced about social media. Difficulties in emotion regulation did indeed predict all 4 types of social media use they looked at. People who found it hard to regulate their emotions were more likely to engage in image management, social comparison, negative engagement, and passive consumption. However, when they looked at whether these social media behaviors then predicted depression and anxiety, the story changed. It turned out that only social comparison-based social media use significantly predicted anxiety symptoms over time. None of the other types of social media use predicted anxiety or depression symptoms beyond what was already explained by the initial emotion regulation difficulties. This is a crucial finding. It suggests that while people struggling with their emotions might use social media in various ways, those ways don't necessarily act as independent drivers of depression or anxiety themselves. The core issue seems to be the underlying emotion regulation difficulties. Social comparison was the only one that chipped in a bit more, specifically for anxiety. This really brings us back to the idea that social media might not be the direct cause of mental health problems that many assume. Instead, it is more likely that how people use social media is a reflection of their internal emotional state. The study highlights that for individuals with emotion regulation difficulties, using social media, particularly for social comparison, can compound their existing struggles. When you're already finding it hard to manage your feelings, constantly comparing yourself to idealized versions of others online can make things worse, especially for anxiety. The big takeaway here is that focusing solely on reducing screen time might not be the most effective approach. Instead, therapeutic interventions should consider how individuals are using social media as a way to cope, or perhaps to avoid dealing with difficult emotions. Therapies that help people build better emotion regulation skills, like dialectical behavior therapy or mindfulness-based approaches, could be more beneficial. The researchers suggest that if we want to help people with their mental health, we should focus on building their emotional competencies, rather than just telling them to put their phone down. It is about teaching them healthier ways to handle their feelings, which will likely translate into healthier online behaviors too. Interestingly, the study also found some differences based on age. Younger participants were more likely to engage in social comparison and passive consumption, which aligns with the idea that younger individuals might be more prone to using these more passive coping strategies, possibly linked to developing emotion regulation skills. On the other hand, older adults were more likely to engage in image management and negative engagement. This could be due to different motivations and digital literacy levels. It implies that interventions might need to be tailored to different age groups, considering their specific patterns of social media use and underlying emotional needs. From a clinical standpoint, this means it's important for mental health professionals to ask not just if someone uses social media, but how and why. Are they seeking validation, distraction, or trying to avoid difficult feelings? Understanding the emotional purpose behind their social media use can provide much more clinically relevant information than simply knowing how many hours they spend online. Preventive strategies could focus on teaching social-emotional skills, including how to manage emotions in digital contexts right from school age. Now, like any study, this one has its strengths and weaknesses. A big strength is that it looked at how people use social media, not just how much, and it used a prospective design, meaning it looked at things over time, which is more powerful than a snapshot. However, because it was prospective and not experimental, they can't definitively say one thing causes another, just that they are linked. Also, the study relied on self-reports, meaning people could have answered in a way that made them look better or worse than they actually are. Future research could use objective measures like tracking actual social media use and look at longer time periods or even conduct experiments to get a clearer picture of cause and effect. Also, the sample had more younger female students, so more diverse groups need to be studied to make sure the findings apply to everyone. And as the authors rightly point out, even when effects are statistically significant, they are often small to moderate in size in psychological research. So understanding the real-world clinical impact is still an ongoing conversation. So, to wrap it all up, this research really shifts the conversation about social media and mental health. It suggests that our struggles with managing our emotions are a more significant driver of depression and anxiety than social media use itself. While certain social media behaviors like social comparison can worsen anxiety, they often act as a symptom or a coping mechanism for underlying emotion regulation difficulties, rather than being the root cause of psychopathology. The key takeaway is to focus on building emotional resilience and healthy coping strategies, which can then help individuals navigate the digital world in a more balanced and supportive way. This study really emphasizes that our inner world, our ability to handle emotions, is fundamental to our mental well-being, and our digital lives are often a reflection of that. It is a great reminder that understanding ourselves, our emotions, and how we cope is probably the most powerful tool we have for navigating the complexities of modern life, both online and off. What do you think about these findings? Are you someone who uses social media to cope with your emotions? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a like and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more insights into the fascinating world of psychology. We've only just scratched the surface here, so stay curious.